Ready to go. Good evening, everyone. It's 7:30, Wednesday, December 13th. We're going to say the pledge and start our meeting. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. What's the matter? No, Omar texted that just a few minutes ago that he is running late to start without him. So we did. Okay. Good evening, everyone. We have a short but full agenda. Last week, I think we had 4 pages. We have half a page agenda, but I feel it's going to be chock full of information and updates and all that, as it usually is at the end of the year. We have people coming in from Zoom. Are there any announcements that we want to make? Anything for the weekend, gentlemen? Okay, Deputy Mayor Lopez will be here, but I feel like I can't hear myself. Am I okay, Jesse? Okay. All right. So welcome, everyone. And we have a presentation that I think is very exciting and will be recorded. When we first did the presentation, I'm on the board, and Karen is, a whole bunch of people with the Youth Advisory Board. What is exciting about it is that a couple of years ago, when we floated the idea, it was the first bureau to be put up in Westchester County in about 3 decades. It was a heavy lift to get it done, but now it's like so far in the rearview mirror because Chima and his staff and all of the youth that are working hard every day to make this a phenomenal program. Every time we get an update, it gets more and more exciting. So today we're going to record the presentation so that not just a few dozen of us get to see it, but everybody gets to see it that wants to see it. So very excited. I'm going to turn it over to the village manager, and we're going to kick off this meeting.
Good evening, everybody. First up, as the mayor said, we have our youth council and our youth bureau director, Chima Monday. I had the privilege of seeing them present a bit longer version of this presentation. We've abbreviated a little bit for the purposes of this meeting, but I am sure you will be duly impressed, as I was. Jamie, you can start sharing the screen. Well, before that, Chima, can you introduce everybody?
Yeah.
Yes, hi. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes. Perfect.
Okay. Yes, so we have Benjamin Grant, and we also have Thomas Kong, and we have Sabrina Hayes and Saeed Zaidi. These are part of so we have a group youth council. Our youth council is made up of, right now we have about 16 council members, and just because of the time constraint that we have, and I see Alexa just joined, Alexa Alvarez. This 5 individuals will be presenting and just updating the board of trustees on what has been happening with the youth bureau, and I'm going to pass it along to Thomas to go ahead. Jamie, if you want to share the slide now, that would be great.
Hey everyone, I'm Thomas. I help facilitate the youth council, and we're just doing a brief presentation about what exactly goes on with youth council, and particularly why it's
Thomas,
yeah.
Can you just speak a little bit more loudly?
Sure, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit better, yes.
All right. Yeah, so I'm just here to explain the what the youth council does and why we each think it's important for the village to have such an organization like this that can sort of empower and enrich the lives of students among us. Jamie, could you go to the next slide? Yeah, so the youth council is, in the simplest form, a selection of community members who sort of help direct the youth's voice in local leadership. This is done through, we have currently 15 members of the youth council. We're aiming to get around 20, and we have 2 members who sit on the youth advisory board in order to discuss with Mayor Levin and other members of the board about what is necessary for the youth to have a improved life in Austining. Next slide, please. Yeah, so the mission of our youth council, again, boils down to the enrichment and giving back to the community. Currently, we're working on a project that will be partnered with T-Town to remove invasive plant species at the Wildwood Preserve over there and educate youth about the importance of environmentalism in their community. And this is just one of the examples that we've had in order to sort of return the favor that the community has done for us. Jamie, next slide, please.
What should each council member contribute? I'm Benjamin Grant Johnson. I'll be reading these next two slides. Community knowledge, as it's the Austining Youth Borough, members should be able to know about what's happening in Austining, the current events, communication skills. One of the main goals and purposes of members is to really express their points so we can have a conversation where all members contribute. Self-awareness, this is a big one. Realizing where you're at and maybe using some of that self-awareness as well to contribute to the conversations. Leadership, this is one of the key things because we want to show that you're able to get along with members, and also if you want to take initiative, if you have that ability, it's great, especially to contribute to the meetings. Positive behavior, positive environment obviously helps everybody. Integrity and consistency. You want to be at every meeting or at least make time to be at the meetings that matter most. Next slide. What topics are discussed in youth council meetings? In the youth council, we're exploring impactful programs such as the water safety swim program. Additionally, our discussions involve initiatives like the Green Project, which we discussed today. Focus on enhancing our town parks and the creation of a community garden to promote unity and community involvement. In each of our meetings, we try to discuss about these programs and how to improve them as well, and just to give out and give back to our community as a whole. We also brainstorm ways we can improve the youth council and how we can increase the number of people in the youth council. As Mr. Monday said, we have currently around 16 members, give or take 15 or 16. And by hopefully the end of January, we want to get that number at least up to 20. Next slide.
Hi, I'm Sabrina. So some requirements to join the youth council is obviously expressing interest in joining, and then visiting our website to submit an application, and then an interview will be scheduled either in Zoom or in person, more in person now. And then once the interview is completed, the next step is to be provided an invitation to the next council meeting. So this is just to make sure that everyone who joins youth council is able to bring a different perspective and will bring their full potential and have initiative into joining. Next slide, please. So some benefits of being part of the youth council is that we get to share our own perspectives in order to work together with others and just to inspire everyone around us to give the best possible outcomes in our community. We get to make an impact with all of our different projects that are able to benefit everyone. And just by joining, we become the change that we want to see in our own community. So being able to be a part of the youth club, we can enact what we want to see, the changes that we want. And when we see a problem, we can bring it up to everyone else on the board and just make sure that this is something that we want to put our efforts into to make sure that we can impact the community more positively going forward. Next slide, please.
Okay, hello. I'm Alexa. So what my slide was, when an assignment is assigned, how is that assignment excused outside of school, like meeting assignments? When an assignment is given, members will will now work on their obligations outside of their regular youth council meetings, and we're expected to complete the assignment in a timely manner as our own work. These assignments are not only just getting things done, they also allow members to contribute to events that will enhance the Austining community. Okay. Next slide, please. And then assign positions in the youth council. These are some of the I think posters that we did that they showed that kind of like help show everyone what we've made, like the marketing community and the green project community. So we could help like show and bring more people to like joining and like knowing more about like the youth council or like the green project, basically. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Saeed, and the youth council typically meets about two times every month, and each meeting is about an hour to an hour and a half long. And these meetings are usually held bi-weekly on Wednesdays, starting at 3:30 p.m. And a lot of the time, we also have meetings with our sub-compartmental groups as well. And yeah, next slide.
So yeah, that's the end of our presentation, and I'd be happy to field any questions. Yeah.
Great. Thank you all. Very much appreciate the time here. So I'll open it up for questions and comments. But before that, I just want to say that this is a youth or teen-driven organization. So even though there is a board, the board also includes three other people actually here on our Zoom chat, but it is very representative, I think, of our diverse community, but just as important, the adults don't get to control everything. The adults are there to support and teach and mentor and do run with programs, but actually this is totally youth driven. They drive the present and the future of the organization. So I think that's really cool. I'll open it for comments and questions. And thanks you guys, by the way, for being here, because I know the other presentation was longer to the board with update on programs and such, but I would just ask to save for me at the end, the programs that you've done this year, and you could each answer it or any, what was your favorite and why? But I'll take that at the end because I want to open it up to comments for those that have not been as intimately involved with this. So I'm going to start with Dana to my right.
Can you hear me? Yep. Hello, fabulous young people. Thank you for doing this. I know you probably have a lot on your plates, but this is a great thing to participate in, and it kind of teaches you how to work in a group and collaborate and brainstorm and all that stuff. And you had mentioned that you have assignments that you do, and I was wondering if somebody could give me an example of an assignment somebody might have had.
Yeah, sure. I can give an example. So recently, as I mentioned, we had an environmental project, and we were interested. Initially, we were interested in sort of the cleanup of the Crown Aqueduct Trail and some other parks around town. Unfortunately, for some reasons, that plan didn't really pan out, and so the assignment that I was given was to sort of figure out how we could maybe collaborate with the I think in the Environmental Advisory Committee and T-Town to sort of find another way to implement this program. And then I met with them over Zoom and sort of brought what I learned back to the youth council, and we discussed it to pick a start date.
Very nice. Do you have more questions, Dana? No? Okay. Deputy Mayor, please.
Thanks for joining us and thanks for the presentation. So I don't have a question. I just have a comment, which is to say thank you for what you're doing. That you have our full support, certainly. And as you're moving forward, what we love to see is youth voice in every part of the village, especially at this time, because we have a lot of big projects that are happening. Our village is going to be looking different. And the people that are going to most be impacted by those changes are you. You're going to be living with them for the longest period of time. So we want to hear your voice and making sure that they reflect your priorities and what you would like our village to look like. So thank you for your involvement, and we are eager for that continued involvement as the years go on. Thank you.
Manny?
Thank you. Thank you very much for all the presentation. It was very helpful to see that. So I really don't have any questions, but more like a comment, a general comment itself. I know you guys are focusing in green projects, green initiatives, creating one of the things that it was more like a highlight for me when I was going through the presentation is creating community gardens. So that has been a topic of conversation here in the village board for a couple of years now. So I'll be interested to see what is the approach that you guys may be taking in the future. There's great organizations around our village that may be able to help you to kind of find something along those lines. One of them is Green Arsenal. If you guys want to piggyback on some other stuff. So I'm assuming that, Karen, you're saying that yes, they have been in contact with them, or?
No.
Yes, we're talking about it. Those, some of these projects take a lot of time and effort and resources, so we'll be navigating that. But there's all different ways to, at least in the very short term, address. We're already actually doing on a very small scale some community gardening with the Grandpa's United program. So those are things that we're on a very small scale, but those are things that we're looking at as we go ahead with some of the capital improvements at the community center. So a lot of things have to fall into place to have a larger scale project.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah.
And look, if you guys thinking about doing a small scale, something small to start, there's a great site that I have mentioned that to our staff before, which is literally right next to Village Hall. A lot of people don't know that. If you walk outside Corona Avenue, right next to the municipal building itself, there's a small brick wall. That little strip right there actually belongs to the village of Ossining. So that could be a potential that you guys could look into do something in there. I think it will be a simple, small project that you can start. And as Omar mentioned, you have the full support of the board and any of the initiatives that you may take in the future. So I'm grateful that you guys are being involved in something like this.
Yeah, thank you. We've actually had some discussions with T-Town about maybe using some of their space and some of their resources to develop a community garden there, but we also hope to bring something closer to home once the Youth Bureau is sort of given more space to develop. I think right now the main difficulty we've faced is really just having the sort of personnel to manage all these different projects, because in addition to the Youth Council, we run after school programs at AMD, there's STEM engagement programs and all sorts of things. So I think definitely once the Youth Bureau can get some more resources and opportunities, we can focus on developing a community garden that can serve us for multiple generations.
That's fantastic to hear. So thank you.
Bob, any comments?
Well, thank you for it's loud. Thank you for coming tonight. Very good presentation. Keep up the good work. Spread the word. And as we said, you have our support 110%. So anything you need, please don't be afraid to come to us and discuss things. But thank you again and keep up the good work.
Right, so I'm back to my original question. All of you or one, I just want to hear from a wider group. What was your favorite project? I know there were a lot of projects this summer. There was the pool, 200 kids got to learn how to swim and got trained in the importance of knowing how to swim. We've added staff. It's never enough, but we did add staff. because this is actually not a committee of some sort. We usually get presentation committee. This actually, Chima's actually, and his staff are employees reporting through the folks at the community center and to Karen Diatori. It's actually now a department within our structure. So what was the favorite project that you'd really like to make sure it continues, that you enjoyed, and why?
I can answer that first. I think that the water safety swim program was probably the most applied and probably the best for our youth, because water and ocean, you never know what situation you can be in. So for all those children to learn how to swim and swim safety, that can save lives. And I feel like in the future, my favorite project is gonna be the green project, because it has so much potential. I think that we can do so much with it, and it can improve our community as a whole.
Great. Thank you. Nice to see you again. I haven't seen you. So I'm glad you're here tonight.
Nice to
Anyone
see you too.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I think that for me, the employment program, the summer employment program that we ran was definitely, although I wasn't personally involved in it, I definitely found it the most impactful with everyone I talked to. Mostly because a lot of people aren't sort of presented with the opportunities to sort of work in a bureaucracy that the employment program provided. And I think that instead of working as a cashier, giving back to your community as well as getting a paycheck for it, really sort of changed the direction of some of my peers and what they wanted to actually do in the future. So I really hope that one continues.
Great. Thank you. Anybody else? It's a volunteer scenario. I'm not forcing anybody. I'm just sort of curious about your favorite.
So like Thomas, I wasn't personally involved, but I really like the idea of Grandpas United.
Ah.
Especially for people that don't have that type of figure in their lives. I think that the lessons that these older people bring about finance, just about life in general, is really impactful and really helpful. And so I think that would be nice to continue.
Wonderful. Anybody else? Okay.
Sorry.
I'm sorry about that. I didn't see you there.
I was a big fan of the water safety program as well. Although I wasn't directly involved with it, I think it built up some fundamental skills for everyone. And to build off of what Sabrina said as well, I really like the idea of the Grandpas United program. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. So they have a bunch of programs. They need all of us, and that includes the people sitting in this audience, to think about how to be involved with this youth advisory. I'm going to put in a plug for Chima so he doesn't have to do it. So if they need a tour of the water plant, if they're interested in it, some of this is about education and professional outreach. So I gave them a tour that we've done of the DRI initiatives, but we have our engineer and water and building department, everything. And Valerie, if your company not only can use interns, but has teaching moments for these kids, that would be appreciated. You could call Chima, find out what they might need. Police, it is, I think, always a good thing for members of the community to get a tour of the police department and meet our officers. I found it super educational. If you can call Sing Sing, and I don't know if any of them want a tour of the penitentiary. I know it's a whole big project, and I don't know if they have age issues. It's not, well, I know, but you know what? My husband's a judge, and he goes and visits all over the New York State and finds it very moving, very important. It is part of our history, right?
Yeah.
So looking at her, yeah, she's, I think, doing a book about it. I'd love to see the fire department reach out to Chima and do more work with them. When we did the tour, there was a lot of conversation about how do we get our newer immigrants more involved, both the parents and the kids. The Grandpas United, I won't mention when we sit around, like you think elderly people, but for some of us, you don't actually have to be a grandparent, and it is grandfathers, not grandmothers, just to be clear, but it's really anybody over a certain age. You don't actually have to be a grandfather to be part of Grandfathers United. And it's supposed to be a really great group. They're also always looking for places to meet in the community. So again, all the folks I just mentioned sitting in this room, it would be great to reach out to them, because I think some of the things that you all do, the professional staff, can maybe entice somebody to enter a career. I actually did speak when I did the walk, that I think a career in as a police officer, and that is actually a great career for the right person. And you guys know how much I love the water plant and the tours that you guys do, because I think it really gets people thinking about engineering professions and what you might want to learn and might want to be interested in. So I would really appreciate if everybody could think in their own world and in their professional world. We have writers, we have human resource expertise, marketing, municipal work, union issues, construction. These are all, I think, important things for the youth in our community. So I know that we're being recorded. This will go out, I think. Jamie will somehow send it out. So part of this is also to ask people in the community to really become more involved and to contact Chima Monday, who's on our staff managing this beautifully, I might add. And for the board to also know that as we look at the community center, they're running out of space. So while they were kind enough not to say it in their presentation, I hear over and over, they're really tripping over each other. They've grown to a couple of hundred people involved in this. It's a lot in like 18 months of real activity. So when we plan the community center, and the village manager already knows this, we have to plan for their growth as well. So thank you, folks. If I left anything out, you could email, you could call us. Really appreciate that you guys took the time out. Wishing you all great times in school. For those of you applying to colleges, my blessings and my good luck in this probably stressful year. And thank you. Anything else, Karen? We're good. Okay, Chima, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Next, I'd like to invite our planning consultant, Valerie Monastra, up. As you know, we have been working on zoning changes to our zoning, which is making some adjustments, going through it for consistency, any number of things to bring it more up to date and also facilitate the implementation of the zoning code. So with that, I'd like to introduce Valerie and have her bring you up to speed with our latest phase of this project.
Hi, Valerie.
Hello, how are you? So I just wanted to update the board. Last time we actually had a conversation about the zoning updates. It was asked that I reached out to the zoning board, the environmental advisory committee, and then also the planning board to get their initial informal feedback on the zoning changes. So I did reach out to all the chairs and we, kind of communicated back and forth on how best to approach this. The chairs, had, they took a look at the overall, what the zoning changes are proposed. They didn't necessarily have any issues with the changes, but they would like to, at this point in time, they wanted me to be able to basically let you know that they're comfortable with it going on to the next round of the process, which is like a formal review. And at that point, it will be formally reviewed before the planning board. And if you'd like to have a formal review from both the ZBA as well as the Environmental Advisory Committee, we can do that as well. I know the Environmental Advisory Committee will need to undertake an LWRP review, consistency review, which is a little bit different. It looks at how the proposed zoning changes would relate to or are consistent with the local waterfront revitalization plan. But they can also look at it for any thoughts on what is being proposed as well. So basically, they're ready to do a more in-depth review on the zoning changes.
I don't know. I'm getting ready.
Okay.
So can I go?
Of course you can. I wasn't being funny.
Hey, Valerie, how
Hello.
are you? Thank you. my recollection is some of the changes I had questions on it. Some of the stuff that you brought up as part of the recommendations I had mentioned to you in the past, that there was at least 2 or 3 of those of the things that you were recommending in regards to changes on the zoning and setbacks and things of that nature that we already have said no to it. So I know you said you were going to go back and talk to the staff and kind of clarify a lot of the stuff, because it wasn't just one item. It was like several items within the list that you had provided to us then. So what happened to those items?
So I think it was really, I mean, I think the only item that was we needed to go back and reflect a little bit upon was the believe it was like the T districts that you had a question on. That was one that you believe that was tabled, and that you wanted me to go back to both Linda and Joe.
It was that, and it was also, I believe, the setbacks required. I'm not sure some of the stuff. So it was at least
No, we're not. I don't think there's any setbacks that are part of the proposed zoning changes.
Okay, so I know there was more than one though. There was more than one item that I had questions on it. So it wasn't just that, and I have to go back. I thought I was going to.
I'll go back and take a look again. I think the zoning changes that were that moved on to the planning board, ZBA, as well as the Environmental Advisory Council were all ones that this board said, go ahead and get an informal review on.
Can we have, I'm going to go back to my notes, and
Sure.
I'm going to go back to the other stuff. Can we have a quick talk offline about this? Because
Yeah.
my concern will be if, let's say, for one item, it was not addressed, that is going to go in front of the zoning board, planning board, architecture review board, environmental board, and they're going to be looking to something that we already have said no a couple months back. I just want to make sure that they don't do something
Right.
that
I'm
we didn't
happy
agree to.
if it's okay with, I mean, I put everything on a Google Drive, so I can just share that Google Drive with
That'd be
the full
fantastic.
board. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
absolutely-
It's been a little bit of time, so it'd be good to
Right.
take a look
Yeah.
at it and refresh before we go on to,
Yeah.
but
Again, yeah, I don't want them to waste their time. I want to make sure we are proactive, and I'll also go back to the meeting that we had on the video, so make sure I don't miss anything.
Right.
So I'll do that. So maybe not tomorrow, but maybe most likely
Sure,
Friday.
not
So
a
I can give you a
problem.
call. All right, fantastic. Thank you.
Anybody else? This side? So Valerie, yes and yes. I think you asked 2 questions, right?
Yes.
If the other 2, so for me,
Yeah.
it's a yes and yes to answer
Okay.
your question.
Okay.
I see no downside to it.
Okay.
And I think there needs to be more work done between the different land use, that they should they don't work together. But some things go from one to the next, but this is more of an educational
Yes,
opportunity, I would
absolutely.
think, right?
Yes.
I mean, part of the whole thing here. So loving it. We get nervous when you show up without a pen, without a
No, I
laptop,
know. That's
without
what Karen
paper.
did.
I mean, honestly, I think the lesson learned here is show up with a loose leaf binder and pretend you're reading something, because we all sitting here going, what is happening here? But thank you.
No, it's really just an update to let you know we did do the next step, and then basically, instead of doing an in-depth review, it was over Thanksgiving. A lot of them, basically Seth suggested, why don't we'll give our initial blessing that yes, we don't see anything that's really problematic, and it's ready for the next round of a more in-depth.
So I don't have it in front of me, but it is really important to me that this entire sort of project, if you'll be framed. You have people who come and go on the boards.
Yes.
They don't all attend all the meetings, although they're very good at it. I'm just saying. Frankly, it's complicated. I just was somewhere last night. I had 2 events last night, and somebody from White Plains from planning, and he said he thinks it's harder than being a mayor, because he had to tell me that. And you always compete. Our kids are friends, and we may be right, actually. They're going through a lot of stuff. If mistakes are made, they're very costly.
Yeah.
Years down the road. He didn't even know what he was getting into, and he's very diligent about it. So it made me think a little bit for tonight that the framing of why we're doing what we're doing, the consequences of this, of that, do they need more from us? Like, it's not just here's 5 bullets. Here's an update. So I'm just, I know you're going to do this. It's not even a question. This is something you're really good at. So please do frame it for
absolutely.
everybody and let it sink in.
Yes.
I think Dana White once said that like what they do is actually one of the most important things in the village, and I don't think people are aware of that.
Well, I'm sure they would appreciate.
Am I
hearing
right?
that.
I don't want to misquote, but I remember you once saying that.
I'm sure I did. No, I did. Because, you know, I mean, this is building stuff. This is, you know, this is, you know, a big deal, and it's very complicated, and they have a lot they have to look at. And you have to deal with a lot of different competing agendas. Not easy. So,
Yeah, and they're volunteers.
and the volunteers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just I'm one other thing I forgot to mention. I also reached out to the Historic Preservation Commission too.
Oh, great.
So, yeah, they were
So that would be yes, yes, and yes.
Yes.
although you have to-
so
I do just want to make one point.
Yeah.
Except for planning, all the others are effectively informal reviews.
right.
Because the code only calls for the planning board, and that's actually by state law. So we can have the other boards opine, but it's not a recommendation.
No, I
this
think she
board.
knows that.
No,
I
no,
think
but
that's
I
why
want, I think
you
what
want the
board and
public
the
to know
public
the
should
board. Sure,
understand
we
that,
know.
as well as those board members.
Right, right. That's a good point. But that's exactly why framing.
Right.
First paragraph of the essay is super important, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So let's frame it and add that in. Although I think they know, but add it in. Things get recorded. People see it a year later. Somebody, you know, blinked and missed something. So very much appreciated.
Yes, absolutely. And then just in the, you know, the next step, Stuart will probably be working on a resolution, you know, implementing, basically allowing the formal process to begin in terms of review. But I will send out I'll make sure that you see all before we even get to that formal review, I'll send the Dropbox link out so that you can see everything that is going to be part of that formal review package, and you'll have the chance to review, and then we can get moving on bringing a resolution to the board.
Great.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Valerie. We have our village engineer and our water and superintendent, Paul Fraioli and Andy Teese here tonight to talk about the contracts that we are going to execute with the 4 separate contractors who will be doing the construction of the new Indian Brook water treatment plant. So with that, I'd like to introduce Andy and Paul and ask them to come up, or just Andy's going to come up for now.
Unless I need help.
Okay.
Good evening, Mayor and Board. So the way the filter plant is broken out in these contracts, it's called Wick's Law, which means that it has to be broken out into 4 separate contracts. You have the general, you have the plumbing, you have the HVAC, and you have the electrical. The majority of this work is through the general contractor. ELQ is the lowest qualified bidder at $68,541,828.64. The highest in that category was $102 million by Jet Industries, and there were other companies in between. As I say this, the Stuart, Karen, Paul, myself, and all the engineers, the consultants have interviewed these companies pretty intensely to see their background, to see the type of work, look at their resumes, and to make sure that they can be responsible and can do this job. ELQ is a really big site contractor, structural work, and more like road.
Andy, I can't hear you. Is the microphone still on?
Yeah, it's his microphone. No, it's
battery died. Oh, okay.
Wow, these batteries die like really fast.
Okay, thanks.
Can you hear? Okay.
All right. So they're the main scope of their work obviously is to build the treatment plant proper, the concrete work, the mechanical systems, the SCADA systems, the system integrators. It's, you know, out of the $100 million, this is, you know, the biggest part of the contract. And it's so imperative that we're happy and we are confident with their subs. So that's part of this process. Solar electric, So that's the electrical part. They came in at 13,100,000. Very competent electrical contractor. 30 years ago, when I started up the Millwood Water Treatment Plant, they were the original electricians that did that job. And a lot of our design is very close to what Newcastle's design. I know they could do the work. They've done multiple treatment plants. Carrie and Walsh, local contractor, they came in at 3,185,000. The highest was S&O Contracting in Pleasant Valley, 4.3 million. Carrie and Walsh is right down the street. They do major work like this. Very, the village has had a relationship with Carrie and Walsh for the last 20 years, so very competent. Mace Contracting, they would be doing the plumbing work at 2.2 million, and they competed against Mengler Mechanical at 2.4 million. A lot of these numbers were really close together, except for the general on the high side. The general on the next competitor was like $400,000 more. So these companies put major effort into bidding these jobs. It cost them lots of money, lots of engineering to go through, 900 drawings and to make sure that their numbers were accurate. The plant would take 37 months of construction. That's how many calendar days, including weekends. Trying to think of any questions I can answer. You want to come on?
Evening, Mayor and Board. Before we open it up for questions, I did want to point out, I don't know if you've saw the recent press release from the governor's office, but she just announced over $400 million in grants. And part of that grant is coming to Ossining. If you remember when we first talked about this plant with you, we made an application for a grant through the WIA program. This is facilitated through the state's Environmental Facilities Corporation, and we received $3 million. But because of COVID and the plant's design and approval duration, we actually withdrew that and applied for more money and just found out yesterday that we're now receiving $5 million instead of $3 million. So just to put that $5 million in perspective for you, it's a general grant and you can draw it down from any facet of the work. But again, to put it in perspective, the entire consulting staff that we're going to have in various offices and on site during the 3 or 4 years of this plant's construction is going to cost about $5 million. So essentially this grant is going to absorb all our soft costs on this project for the duration of this project. And that was a nice thing to secure. Yeah. So, and we're also working with the manager's office to hopefully secure an additional 10 million over the next year. Exactly. Fingers crossed. And that aforementioned WIA grant is something we can apply for every year. So we're going to continue to do that through the life of this project. Looking forward to doing that. Thank you.
Major credit to the manager's office and to Dale's office, because the amount of write-ups that Karen DeTore had to write up, and Maddie and Dale, all the backup was just intense, and Stewart's review. So it was a team effort. This was a lot of time. It would have been very upsetting if we didn't get the $5 million. So thank God we got that.
Okay. So I appreciate the optimism. The $3 million was about 10%. Now 5 million is like 5%, because the project went from 30-something million to over 100. It's actually 102 million now. Last 2 weeks ago it was 98 million. Now it's $102 million. I don't. Does that even include the 10% contingency?
So that's the
good news.
Yeah.
So it's gotten really expensive for a village like ours, and I am disappointed in both our senator and assemblywoman for all the work that they did, but did not actually get us what I would consider a reasonable amount. The staff in Ossining for I don't know how many years now have been nothing short of really good citizens and making sure that our water supply is the best it can be to maintain the reservoir. So many municipalities sort of let it go. It becomes an emergency and then they get money. It's nothing I haven't said before. I just haven't said it so publicly, but like everybody else on this board and like everybody in this room, we all pay taxes. And as a taxpayer, I'm thoroughly disappointed that you guys didn't get more. You deserved more for all the work that you did. You got broccoli for spinach, as far as I can tell, for all the work that you did. And while I appreciate how nicely you presented tonight, both as a taxpayer and a person who votes, I'm really disappointed for all the work that went in. You guys deserved 10 times the 5 million, as far as I could tell, or at least 3 times that. So we'll have to keep plugging away, but giving up 5 million to get 5 million is not exactly, 3 million for 5, because what you guys are doing is what every municipality should be doing. Every municipality in Westchester County that has such aging infrastructure should have incentives to build new state-of-the-art infrastructure, not have to go and beg for money from other agencies. So I'm sorry you didn't get more than this. We're gonna have to, as usual, take care of ourselves. So I'm not gonna lie, I never lie up here. You didn't lie either, but you deserve better. And it is true that the finance department, the manager, putting these grants together, phone calls that were made, it was a ton of work. So maybe I'll go to something for 24. Maybe we'll do better in 24. And I think you called the congressman's office. I think you called the governor's office. I mean, so I can only beg that all of these consultants not only are good, but that they come in on budget, because it's already become so much more than what we agreed to in the beginning. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm just saying it's an unfortunate scenario that exists. It's just the way we are. But I appreciate all the work that's been going through, and maybe 24 will be better. That's my only hope, is that all the work will go towards the next round. And you should still show the water plant and your engineering stuff to those kids.
Absolutely. It's kind of crazy, but I know it's a little off topic, but I called Karen a couple of weeks ago about this. I'm driving home thinking about all this rain, and we normally get a water bill between 180 and 200,000 a month from New York City. We're taking 55% of our water right now from our own reservoir. And with the new treatment plant, because of excursions, because of alkalinity and water chemistry, we'll be able to take more as long as it's filled and it's flooding over. That's money in the bank. That's like a lot of communities in Westchester do not have that ability.
Yeah,
they have to buy everything through New York City.
Yeah. Who, by the way, just does whatever they want. So, it's just the way it works. We're not going to change it tonight, but I wanted to be honest about it. And I'm just hoping 24, maybe the work will pay off a little bit more. So I don't have questions about the plan, because maybe by the time I'm no longer mayor, I'll understand something Andy actually teaches us here, and I'll remember the chemistry. I wish my chemistry teacher was still alive. He'd be watching our Andy every day. He'd be sitting in this room, because I think it's like everything we learn and we all think, oh, when are we ever going to use it? Well, you're a great example. This is like literally the tap water we drink. This is what it's about. So I always appreciate the education.
Yes.
You what? Yes, well, it's pH levels. It's all this stuff we learned. I just wish I could remember all that stuff. Yes.
That's a good one.
And that I actually knew it. And it was in the New York Times puzzle the other day. My husband. No, not the root of it, because Mark actually got it. I said, oh my God, you actually remember this. So yes, and he knows how to spell it, which is really great. Yeah. What?
I think anyone who questions whether we need this plan or not, and should take a tour of our current facility, which does a great job, and the water has been tasting amazing lately. I drink it right out of the tap. Tastes great. The plant is put together over various eras, right? From the 19th century on up. Like what, the 40s? Is that the most recent?
The most recent was
83.
Yeah, that was a big.
And nothing against how you guys do this, but you do an amazing job keeping that whole thing together, because it has to be kind of MacGyvered sometimes, right? But it's amazing work that they do, and it'd be great to have a plant that, especially as more demands are made on water quality and on various things from the feds, to have a really state-of-the-art plant, I think is going to be something that serves this village for a very, very long time.
Yep. Thanks. Anybody else? Okay, gentlemen, thank you. Oh.
No, I wasn't gonna, actually, no, I'm not gonna ask anything, but actually, I have a few comments. I actually like broccoli, so.
I like both. That's not the point.
I know. So Andy, Paul, Karen, Stuart, Dell, Maddie, obviously, I think the group that, it reminds me a little bit of all this DR process that we did several years ago when we did great presentations. And we were finalists a couple times and we didn't get the prize. And it took a while to get to that level. I was hoping to get to be in that wave that we were getting a lot of money. I mean, this past year and the previous year, we've been getting a lot of money from the state, which is fantastic. But yes, I'm disappointed that we did not get the $30 million this time around, because that definitely would have helped a lot to our community. Like Rick had mentioned, it's like we are doing, you guys, not as much as we do, but you guys are actually making sure that that plant and those projects are up to date to meet the requirement standards, and not like other communities do, just let it go and try to fix that as they go. And those are the people, those are the communities that are getting the money. So I'm disappointed in that as well. I guess I can ask that question. Who got the $30 million?
The county.
No, it's sorry, Westchester Joint Water Authority down in the southern part of the county. It's they have Westchester Joint and they have Northern Joint. Which
what is that? What's Westchester Joint?
It's an authority, a water authority that serves the southern part of Westchester, including.
How many communities?
I think about 5. It's like Larchmont, Rye, Harrison, Mamaroneck.
Wow, all the least affluent communities in the county.
Yeah.
Each of those communities is filled with multimillionaires. It's the most affluent communities in the country.
Again, I don't know if it's irony or not, but their plant is a larger version of our plant. And they're still in design phase. They're kind of lagging us a little bit in the process, because we've been tracking that as well, because we were trying to get into the ground a little before them with this grant in mind, and with the contractors in mind as well, so that we can get the attention from the contractors to bid this project. Same design engineers. And again, next year is next year. We'll just keep swinging. We're going to be at this for a while. And another collateral benefit, I know it's not intended to try to make light of the presentation when we didn't get it, but Andy kind of soft sold that operating budget benefit that we're going to have for years to come now with this new technology. We're just, we're going to save so much money in not just water usage, but in chemical usage, in trucking costs, and all the other operating numbers that come out of the water fund every single year versus our capital debt service are going to be reduced because of the technology. It's gonna be a environmentally friendly building. We're gonna have reduced trucking because there's gonna be less sludge amount produced,
less pollution.
Technology of dissolved air flotation is going to require less chemical for flocculation and settlement. We're going to actually float the solids now versus settling them. Therefore, we can pass through more water, hence the 7 million versus the 4 million that we have now. So all those reoccurring operating budget costs that are, our hands are tied a lot with the existing plant, because we have the technology that we have, and we have to do to make it work. So it tastes the way it tastes. I mean, we have to add those chemicals, we have to do those things, but that's not going to be the case in the new plant. The new plant, when finished, it's today's date, state of the art, and it's going to have UV disinfection for belts and suspenders, all things that are really going to take whoever takes this system over in 10 and 20 years, they're going to be in a good place.
So it's 3 years and a month, right?
Give or take.
Isn't 30, did you say 30
Yeah.
months?
Yeah.
See, you should be happy. We're listening. We're tuned in.
Yeah.
That's real. because I go out 37 months and it really is like an aggressive 37, but it's not real, then we're gonna disappoint people. This is
Well,
like,
no, it's about as real as we can make it. I
Okay.
mean, there's always those, crazy
know.
unforeseens, but
Always.
these are, I mean, that's how Andy
you
started.
feel good about it.
These contractors have been vetted. Stewart can attest to that. And we have the right people in place. No one's coming and building their, first plant with us.
No, for
Um,
sure.
And
That's
we're
great.
we're in a good place.
Well, I mean, they're recognized brands. These are companies that, but even I know these companies, so I think that's great. All right.
So like we talked about the future and we talked about how the filter plant was changed for the last 100 years. This is going to be good for the first 40 to 50 years, but this also has blind flanges, basically pipes that are going outside the building with flanges that we don't have at Indian Brook now, that we can add process trains 50 years, 100 years for if anything were to change. If you needed more water, if the community needed more water, industry
They're
changed.
putting in add-ons, like when
Right.
they're building these days and they're putting in the infrastructure to put solar one day, that kind.
So
They're thinking smarter.
when the youth that just presented to us are running.
Right, when they're running things, right? Yeah. What's gonna happen to the old plant, a museum? Well, pieces of, you'll save some of the really historic stuff, right?
We've actually talked about that with the manager's office.
I think the water museum would be great.
Um,
Hey, the old Kurt Necro presentation can go there.
Much of all of the mechanical systems are still going to have to remain intact during the first year or so of operation in a new plant. So we have that backup if something doesn't go as anticipated. But ultimately, one thing that we always struggle with, particularly up at the Rodriguez Operations Center, is space. There's lots of services out of that building. And if we could possibly relocate water distribution and possibly administration.
Right, for office, you've got offices there and everything, so.
There's it's a valuable building to us. The mechanical systems will obviously be pulled out of there and converted to a beneficial space. And just to go back to your other question, not to drag this on, but the gatehouse is actually circa 1888. They put the gatehouse there at the first reservoir, and that gatehouse actually served our existing plant up until the time that we did the dam rehabilitation and spillway. We also everybody says we did the dam over and the spillway over, but the biggest asset of that project that really benefited us the most was the new intake structure. That was for water quality. That was the main component. And we really did that as an aside to what the DEC was mandating, which was the spillway. We did a new intake structure to allow us to bring in water that wasn't being subject to solids off the bottom of the reservoir. We put a new screening system in. So now the water coming in is even of a better quality. And when we did that project, we put a blind flange on that to facilitate the new facility. So we actually already have the intake structure into the reservoir for the new facility that we built during the dam project. So we're ready.
Well, the new one's going just about 100 yards away from the current one?
Yeah, if you've been to the plant on the property, when you pull in the road that takes you to the existing plant, it's being constructed on the 2 plus or minus acres to the left as you pull in, just past the aqueduct trail.
Thank you, gentlemen. Anybody else?
Just one curiosity, how many generals bid the job? 4?
Yeah.
And the question of the day, when do you think there'll be a shovel in the ground?
Right now, they're going to be the bond resolution is going to be on the next agenda. And I'm sorry.
Resolution will be before the board on the 17th of January. Not the bond resolution, the awarding of the contracts. You already done the bond resolution.
Yeah.
Contracts awarding will be the 17th of January. And after that, then we have to sign. We have to deal with certain changes to the contract in terms of some language based upon, but otherwise, that's where we are. The reason it's not coming right away to award is we're in a 30-day estoppel period right now, because you approved the bond at the last meeting.
Then they'll be issued the notice of award and then the notice to proceed after we get all of their front end documentation investigation out of the way, but they're already working on it. We've spoken to all 4 contractors. Yeah.
They want to get started, you know, because there's going to be mobilization areas, as you know. They need to widen the driveway, office trailers for the contractors. Yeah. Yeah, and have to move power, temporary power. So as soon as the weather dependent, they want to get going.
And Karen, there's gonna be communication to the people living there.
Yes. There will be, and I've spoken to Andy about this, we will be dealing with the neighbors that are nearby, particularly those with whom we'll be getting access agreements. Those that will be in certain areas. There were access agreements for prior work. We'll be dealing with those same property owners this time around as well, but they will all be made very much aware of when and what work's going to be done, particularly as we come down their street.
And there'll always be some folks that we're not aware of the project, but we'll make sure they are before we start. But I will say that a couple of years ago, they were all made aware during the town's planning board process. We went to about 6 or 7 different meetings with them, and there was always public notification of our presence at the meeting. So Waterview, everybody in Crotonville, they know that it's coming. But again, people move in and people move out. So
yeah, that's called living. Yeah,
we're gonna do another push once we get our ducks in order.
Good. Hey, Jamie, Jamie and I were working on the website earlier today. Now you have something to put on, one more thing to put on the homepage, because whenever this starts being real, that should take like a spotlight position.
Yeah.
Even though it doesn't affect everyone in the village, it's a specific neighborhood. Nevertheless, those roads are a little tight. But those folks all know there's a water plant there. And when they bought their properties, they knew it was there. It was there before most of the properties. So I know they're going to be really like helpful, but people just have to know. I'm sure there are a lot of new owners there, etc., that were not around last time.
And for the greater Austin area, and I spoke to Jamie about this a couple of years ago, we put into the general contractors facet of the bid documents inspection and documentation facet, which includes video and camera daily inspections for not just for construction benefit, but we can also push it out to social media. So the public will be able to follow along with our process of as it goes along.
No, that's great.
Construction.
Yeah, well, we're getting so much better at communication. So I think every day is like a new opportunity. All right. Anybody else? Gentlemen, thank you. Stuart, thank you. Jamie, thank you.
Thank you.
And everyone else, and I think we can move on.
Thank you both very much. Our treasurer, Dale Brandon, is on Zoom, and she is here tonight to discuss the annual relevy of unpaid fees, such as water and sewer, property cleanup, and ETPA fees. So with that, I will turn it over. She had sent a memo that was distributed to you all, but I will turn it over to Dale to continue that discussion.
Thank you, Manager Dettori. Good evening, Mayor and Board.
Hello, Dale.
Yeah.
I said hello.
Oh, hello. My headphones aren't plugged in correctly. So as we're moving forward this month, we're working on creating the 2024 village tax bills. Part of that process, as you have all been through before, is the relevying of unpaid water and sewer over to the first half 2024 tax installment. The amounts that are transferred over are any balances with a due date prior to July 1st of 2023, 4 quarters backwards into 2022, if that is the case. Our relevy amount is higher this year compared to last year. Part of that is we do have one large property that has an unpaid balance. I was hoping that the payment would be forthcoming shortly, because I've been told that the property was actually sold, but I have not, as of today, seen a payment posted. So as I move forward with the process, it might get transferred and then they'll just have to satisfy it on the tax side of the equation. Additionally, this year we have unpaid ETPA fees. It's the same ones that we transferred to the village taxes last year in the amount of $5,025. And we do have property cleanup fees, which we are able to transfer over as a lien onto the property, totaling $15,840, which is, I think we did a lot more property cleanup in 2023 versus 2022. In 2022, we had $2,840 that was transferred over to the village taxes. So forthcoming, if the board agrees, will be resolutions for the December 20th meeting so that we can then present our file to the printing agency to get the tax bills into the mail. Any questions?
Anybody?
No.
Okay, thank you, Dale.
Great, thank you.
Okay, next on our agenda, we have Deputy Mayor Omar Lopez here tonight to discuss recommendations for the Police Reform Advisory Committee. We also have Captain Donahue from the Police Department here as well.
Thank you. I'm going to have Jamie pull up a presentation so we have something to follow.
This wasn't sent though, so it was.
It was.
It was. Yeah, it was sent to us, but it's not on the agenda.
Correct. It will be in the morning.
Great, thank you.
For sure. We're seeing presenter view. Ms. Hoffman.
Sorry, I have to switch screens. Give me just a second.
No problem. As this comes up, usually you would have folks on the committee presenting, but our chair is going to be transitioning, not just off of being the chair, but off of the committee altogether, Jackie Shaw. So first I want to say thank you to you, Chair Shaw, for, she's not here, just I'm looking at the camera. I'm just looking directly at the camera.
Jamie, are any members of the committee on Zoom with us?
No.
Okay.
And for all of your hard work and leadership, that has been very much appreciated. So here's what I would like to cover tonight.
Can you see it now?
Yes.
Okay,
Next
good.
slide.
Thank you.
I'll start with some context. We'll talk about what has happened between 21 and 23, what the scope of work looks like moving forward, what's next in terms of process, and then questions from the board. Next. Look familiar? Huh? Okay. So police reform didn't start in 2020, but that is when Executive Order 203 happened. Governor Andrew Cuomo signed this particular executive order after the murder of George Floyd. And police reform in Ossining is something that has been going on for quite a long time, but this was a particular moment in time where every municipality in the state had to come up with a plan for reforming their police and submit that to the state. And so we went ahead and did that. And we've been reporting ever since. So what have the results from that particular project been? You can move forward, Jamie. So this is a lot of words. They'll be linked in the agenda tomorrow, so you can read them in particular. But it's a summary of some of the highlights. Now, if you've followed when the chief has come and kind of laid down every single reform and where we are in the process, you can really get granular with it. But this gives you a sense of what some of the biggest highlights are. The first one that I would point to, and to me, what I think is one of the most impactful, is the standing up of the mobile crisis response team. And this is a particular team that is a response unit for mental health, homelessness, substance abuse, et cetera. These are mental health professionals that go out with the police in order to respond to calls. And it has been an amazing resource. They serve more than just Ossining, but they're housed in Ossining in this particular region, and that has been a huge boon for the community. And so that was one of the results from the Executive Order 203 recommendations to really get that work going. And it's not something that we as a municipality could do by ourselves. We needed the county's partnership, and having nonprofits and the county and the village come together was really strong. In addition, we have all sorts of emphasis on training, on hiring. There's been a big push on being able to improve our police and how they exist and how they do their work. A review of policies and procedures, and increase oversight and transparency, including changes to the Civilian Police Complaint Review Board, which is one of the places where the Police Reform Advisory Committee spent a lot of its time and energy in the first year or so, really shaping that local law. And it was a local law that had gone through a number of different iterations. And thanks to their work, it was, I thought, really, really strong. So we've been able to accomplish a lot over the course of the last 2 years. If you go on the website and look at all of the recommendations for reform, they are all either complete or in progress or ongoing. So we've been able to make a ton of progress. But just like police reform didn't start in 2020, it doesn't end in 2023. And so what does the future have for us? So Jamie, if you will move forward. Here's the scope of work that we have sketched out for the next couple of years. This is a scope of work that the committee and I have come together to develop. So first, the objectives. First is to review and analyze currently police policies, practices, and procedures. So this is a continuation of the work that happened a couple of years ago. Second is to identify and recommend areas for reform and improvement within the Ossining Police Department that will improve transparency, trust, and accountability between the police department and the community. To solicit public input and feedback after the implementation of police reform. So we want to both get input on what should be happening and feedback on what has happened. That those two components, the input and the feedback, were both really important to the committee. And then present actionable reforms to the Board of Trustees so that the board can discuss and then choose which to implement. Those are the objectives for the next 2 years. Specifically, these are examples of tasks that the committee will do. This is not exactly a project plan, but in kind of laying out what might it look like to be able to reach those objectives, the committee was thinking to conduct a comprehensive review of all the policies and procedures, to organize community engagement sessions, to collaborate with OPD to get their thoughts on operations and challenges. This was one that we didn't do a ton of, researching best practices and innovative strategies in police reform across the county, across the state, across the country, to identify what are things that are working in other places. Developing recommendations for policy changes, establishing clear timelines and benchmarks for any proposed reforms, and then providing regular updates to the board. The idea is that there will be these kind of regular updates, but then also, importantly, the kind of culmination of this work are these annual reports. There will be one a year, one in 24, one in 25, that capture the work done up until that point. But it's really the one in 2025 that is going to be crystallizing a lot of the work that has happened over those 2 years to present. Here are the reforms that we most think are going to be helpful to the board. In terms of communications, the committee would publish recommendations and progress reports on the village website. making it open to anybody that wants to be able to provide their voice, and then open the conversation to independent experts and agencies for their thoughts on these reform recommendations as well. So logistically, what is next? We will be discussing tonight this game plan, this scope of work, getting your feedback, making any appropriate changes. Next week, I have a resolution to be able to make it official, because the resolution that we have for the Police Reform Advisory Committee, as it stands right now, is very specific to the work that happened in response to Executive Order 203. So this would be a fresh resolution that reflects this new scope of work. And then that work would start in January of 24, along with the committee members having their positions renewed for 2 more years. The first annual report would happen by December of next year, and then the second annual report by December of the following year. And that's it. And these are 2 folks from the Mobile Crisis Response Team, along with our state senator and, of course, beloved chief. Questions from you all? One at a time, please. Slow down, one at a time.
Okay, so thank you.
Yeah.
This is a little unusual. Actually, I thought that you're going to have members of the committee here. I'm actually surprised that none of them are here. So because liaisons don't usually do this role, right? Even if there isn't a chair, she was there for a long time, but since inception.
Yeah.
So it's weird because this isn't your role actually. You've taken on the role of the committee. The liaisons don't actually do that. So I'm caught in this weird environment of, and I thought we had conversations about it. So I'm sort of trying to go back and figure out how that happened. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I need to go back. Jamie, can you put this back? Because I have a bunch of questions. Is there any reason why none of the members are on Zoom?
So I invited the members. The conversation really was shaped around roles and responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
The board's role is, the committee's role is to recommend reforms to the board. The board's role is to consider those recommendations and decide which of those they would like to move forward with,
Right.
and then work with the police department in order to actually implement them.
Right.
In deciding what should the committee's work be, should the committee continue to exist, who should be on the committee, all of that is the role of the Board of Trustees to decide that. And so the board first looks to me as the liaison that has been a part of these conversations to say, okay, liaison, what's your recommendation? Given this context, what do you think? And that's everything from who should the chair be to who on this particular committee should we renew their seat on, or what is the scope of the work, or whatever. So you turn to me, what's your recommendation? We give the recommendation, blah, 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 blah. Then we discuss. A very similar process, for example, with placemaking, where you have the placemaking committee, Trustee White kind of gave, here's the outline of the thing, and we're going to choose who's on it. You interview people. The committee is made up of community members that ultimately make recommendations to the board, in that case for placemaking,
Right.
But Trustee White is really driving the work until there are chairs that are really doing that work on the committee's behalf. Nevertheless, it's her role to be the conduit for ensuring that the work is moving ahead. That's my position now. As we have a transition of chairs, my work is to continue to kind of draw that bridge between our current chair and whatever future chair, given the fact that the committee's work is done according to the resolution. So we could end the committee today, but there's a real hunger from the committee members to continue police reform work until we had a number of conversations about, okay, well, what would that look like? And the result was what you saw in front of you here.
Okay, so one of the things I'm interested in is consistency across volunteer groups. Your scenario close, but not really. The reason Trustee White presented is because no committee existed. She presented the establishment of a committee. This committee exists, but regardless, it would end up, we would turn to you and say, I'm just surprised, to be honest with you, because I know there's a lot of energy in the committee. It's actually The committee, by the way it was established, totally unfunded by the governor's office, continues to be unfunded. Doesn't really exist in most places. There's a county one here in Westchester. So we're actually going to be looking at it as, one, should it continue? And we've had conversations, the board should, because these are appointed positions. So just like sort of as a context for the conversation and for memorializing this. So it's a little bit different. I think Dana would not have presented if the committee actually existed. There was no committee. And in the future, she probably won't be. It'll be the committee, as all committees actually present, so we can actually have a conversation with the volunteers, not the liaisons. That said, let's go back because there's just a few things that I'd like to like sort of consider. Because, you know, my feeling about committees is yay, you know, if people want to volunteer their time and help the board do better and good things for the community, and they're members of the community, and they include people and they're inclusive of opinions, present to the board to help us get input. What's the downside? There's nothing but upside to that. So now I'd like to go with that frame and just go back to this because, you know, the mayor got involved in the beginning parts of it. So if you can go to the next one.
The previous one.
There's no page numbers, so sorry, I can't.
There are
I guess
numbers.
I can't see
Bottom
them on
left.
here. You're right. It is on the bottom left. So overall, the piece that I'd like added in here, and it may be really just a nuance, to be honest, is the members are continuing because I have to in January, you know, so who's interested, who's not. This is a volunteer group with a couple non-volunteer members. I think attorney goes there, and I don't know if that's suggested because it doesn't say anywhere here that that continues as the process. I think that just needs to be stated.
Right.
Because it was one thing to do that as part of the original mandate. It's no longer really a mandate. So now we have to design committees, and how involved Stuart even wants to be, because frankly, that's not really what we do except for the land use, which is a very different structure. I'd love to know who in the police is being suggested. Is it one person, two? Are we keeping that whole structure the same? It's implied. I think it just needs to say, because I think when the public looks at it, they should know that this committee also includes police officers. It is not we and them. It's supposed to be, I'm looking at you because you're a police officer, right? So you're here. And you've actually spoken, I think, with the committee, yes, at some point?
I was involved more with the Civilian Complaint Review Board than the PRA.
Which is like an indirect, because there's a little tiny
Right,
bit of overlap.
Right, there's
okay.
some Venn diagram
Right.
there, but certainly.
Right. So I think it's great. What isn't clear to me, and I don't know if I want to do the fixing now, because I did get it this afternoon and I skimmed because it was only a few hours ago. What's different? Because a big chunk of this sounds like what I would have read. If you didn't put the years on there, it would have been 22 or 23. So I'd be really interested in, like, is there points of differences here? And also whether it's a timeline or in the bullets. Can you move one more? Keep going. I didn't write the number. Keep going. Pictures are great. I didn't know we had this many motorcycles in Austin, to be honest, in our police department.
We don't.
We don't.
That's separately.
Yeah, I was going to say, where did they all come from? What budget were those things on? Hold on. Go back. I didn't write the page number. I'm sorry. I just took little notes. Review and analyze, identify, recommend areas for improvement within the Austin Police Department will improve transparency to solicit public input and feedback. So somewhere here in the objectives, that's all cool. The public input I'd like to hear more about, because committees actually come to the board and the board then goes out and says, how do we do that? How do we involve? We are the arm that talks to the public. So I want to hear more about it. I've seen many memos with ideas, but I don't know where you guys landed on that. Our committees don't go out and solicit. They're not advocacy groups and they're not nonprofit organization with their own structure. The structure is that we are the ones that communicate with the public. So I just want to see, because I think I know how they're going to do it, but I'd like to hear more about that. And that doesn't have to be done this week, but I'd like to see that. Recommend action reforms to the Board of Trustees, then flip over. it seems to me that you would want to first recommend to the board an idea, because you and not you, the committee are members of the public, right? And they've been sitting and doing this. They've gone to courses, they've learned, they've studied. I think one or two sit on the county. It seems that you'd want to come to the board and say, here's an idea, yes or no. And within this idea, we'd like to do a survey. We'd like to get input. We'd like to get your input. If it's a no, what's the point of getting public input? That's more the way advocacy groups work. You come to board and the board says, yeah, I like these three. We do that with other committees. We like this. We need to pay for this. We need to do a survey. And then we can go out and do it. So I would just ask that you sort of rethink, if I had to look at that and say, where does the board come in? At what point? Because I'm not sure the way I'm reading it that it comes in early enough before we go off and do whatever it is that is recommended. Because that I think is going to be worked on. But I think the difference between what was and what the new looks like will be appreciated, because it just isn't clear, maybe clear to others. I just found that a little bit missing.
Could I pause you?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I just want to respond before I forget.
No, I'm looking at this now. So
Yeah.
I'm one step too far. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
Okay, great. I just want to, yeah. So first, membership. So if you look at the resolution from 2020, that January 21,
Right.
that had basically two sections to it. The top half talked about basically everything that's here. Why does this committee exist? What is this committee? What are the objectives of the committee? That kind of stuff. The second half is about membership. Who are the members of the committee, specifically demographically, regionally? We should have a member from the town, et cetera, et cetera. There's no changes recommended from the committee on the second half of membership. The recommendations are on the top half, which reflect Executive Order 203. Now that that part is done, the objective and the tasks can now reflect the next stage of the work of the next couple of years. So that's why there isn't any language here recommending changes to the second half of the resolution.
Okay, so the absence of the change means we want it to be where it was.
Correct. Yeah,
Okay.
that it's good as is.
That's
That
fine.
part is good as is.
Normally, we go the other way. But that's okay, because now we know.
Yeah.
I love the timelines and benchmarks, because I think for committees, that's crucial. Even if you have to move, though, at least we know, right? Like,
yeah,
everybody should work like that. I think the village staff actually works well like that. Regular updates, of course, most of our committees meet, I think, with us once a year. There's a couple. This one actually was 3 times a year, though. The police was reporting. The chief was reporting 3 times a year.
The chief was doing kind of quarterly-ish updates,
Right.
about 2 to 3 times a year.
3 really, I think.
Yeah. In this case, it would move
budgets and stuff.
Right. This would move to annual reports and then kind of regular updates as they come about.
Okay, fabulous. So the whole structure stays. We still have to have a police officer on there.
Correct. So
we have to pay for that.
Sergeant McGovern has been the one
Good. And
going to the
that's,
meetings.
I think,
Yeah.
working well. Yeah.
Yeah. He likes it.
Okay.
We asked him, do you want to stay? He said yes.
All right, so everybody was
I
asked.
know he's enthusiastic.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Can
Mhm.
you go on to the next one?
Before
Please.
continuing, I want to respond to your second point. So I did a bunch of research on how these committees have worked in other municipalities, both in the county and especially in other places around the country. And in many ways, it's similar to what the process was around Executive Order 203, where there's a committee that is formed. Their job is to figure out, from a review of policies to engaging with the public, what are the kinds of issues that exist, and then what are the kinds of potential solutions to those issues, then presenting that to the legislative body so that they are aware of here are the issues that we were able to identify, whether the issues are on paper because they're in a policy, whether the issues are data that we're seeing, whether the issue is what we're hearing from the community in whatever way that information was gathered. And in response, our recommendations are this kind of training or that kind of thing or making this thing or whatever. So then the board would take that information and say, hey, I agree that these are problems. These are maybe not the right solutions. I agree that these are problems and these are the right solutions. Let's move forward. But in order to implement that solution, how exactly would that look? And you kind of move forward to the implementation stage of the work, if indeed you want to move forward to that stage. But in terms of being able to identify what are the potential solutions, it's not that, for example, we say, let's say we didn't have body cams, that the committee says we should have body cams, and then asking the community, do you think that we should have body cams? And then getting their thoughts and then bringing it to the board. And then we've done all this work as a committee, and I say we representing the committee, the board looks at it and says, we don't want to do body cams. And then it feels like, well, why did you do all that work in the first place? It's more saying, hey, we have this problem where people are saying that there are issues with the police and no one's around. It's their word versus the police officer's word. What are potential solutions to that? You could do body cams, you could do car cams, you can do having 2 officers on every scene. You can do all these various things. The board looks at it and says, you know what? I think we should invest in body cams. Let's do that. How about we investigate how much would it cost? What's the implementation? But then you get into the actual implementation of it all. The idea here is that there was certainly work in engaging with the public in 2020 with, and you'll remember it, there were surveys, there were small groups, there was town halls, there was all sorts of stuff. And that was helpful in being able to gather relevant information. That also was not the end all be all. There's now been a couple of years worth of time that we're in a different place. That was during the pandemic, and we're now post-pandemic in many ways. And so it's a different time. And so you can be able to raise different kinds of issues, propose different kinds of solutions. And the idea is that the board, the committee over the course of the next 2 years would present some helpful suggestions rooted in reality with some specificity that the board could consider whether it wants to implement or not.
Okay, that sounds fair. It's a little different, but it sounds right. So are open to, so I think aren't they all these meetings open to the public? Are they all recorded, or minutes or attendance?
They're not recorded. Yeah, they're not recorded. There's not official minutes taken, but there was a conversation of, should we have summaries or something like that. There will be information made available to the public that wants to know what is the committee, what is the process, what are they considering. They do want to be clear so that anybody that is engaging with it, whether they've been engaged for many years or they're just getting into it, can kind of catch up with what's been going on.
Okay. I only asked that because I think at some point, looking at Stewart, when we did the committees, it was like 75% attendance. So to get a 75% attendance to remain on a committee, you have to take attendance. I thought all the committees were supposed to do minutes, although some of them from quasi-legal.
I take attendance at every meeting.
Oh, so you do. It's just not listed here. So you basically were continuing as we were. Mm-hmm. If we're not continuing exactly, we're going to stay. Okay. So, and can you go to the next slide? Okay, great picture. This one. Yeah, thank you. And so, okay. So the deliverables at the end of December is doing an annual report, end of December 25, doing annual, tracking against the next phase of its work. Okay. All right. So the reason you're here is for the board to decide whether this committee should continue. And we're going to go through that, but it feels like the liaisons are committing along the committee members who seem engaged to continue. And we're having a lot of changes in the police department, but that could be a good thing. I don't know. I mean, who knows? Good or bad? Not really. We don't know. And what, 80% of the police department, 70% are new police officers? Relatively new. Would you say it's more than 50%?
Maybe I'm wrong. I suppose on your definition of new, but
oh, I see. Some of them are transfers, so they're experienced police, but they're new to us.
That's right. I mean, someone who's been in it as long as me might consider someone with 5 or 6 years to still be new. So it's all a matter of
I get it. Yeah. Okay. All right. So an interesting time. Again, I don't know if that's good or bad. It's just an interesting time, huh? I can't predict the future. I wish I could. All right. So I actually just found the presentation. and I know that you guys have worked on it. But I was really focused on so it's different going forward from what it was. That was for my head here. Does anybody have any comments, questions for the deputy mayor?
So I have maybe a few questions, but I want to start with Omar, thank you for all the work. This is definitely a lot of work. I think that being liaison for the committees, this is one that you have taken into excel in a lot of different areas that I don't think I think none of us would be able to take the challenge that you took. So it's a big task. So let me ask you the first question. Actually, Rick had asked that question. I mean, what was the request? And that's the request if we're going to continue with this. So let me ask you this. You mentioned that you have done a lot of research in other communities and what they have done. So what, because this was supposed to be, I want to call it a temporary process. So what other communities have done with relationship to what you're proposing to do now here in Austin?
Yeah. So oftentimes these kinds of committees are created in response to a tragedy of some kind, a crisis of some sort, a crisis in leadership, some sort of incident with a member of the public, something like that. So the idea is, hey, let's really reform our police so that this doesn't happen again, or to fix this big problem. We're in the fortunate position that although this particular work with Executive Order 203 was in response to crisis, we're now in 2023 not responding to crisis. We're in a place where we can, in many ways, kind of sober-mindedly say, okay, this is something that is important to us that we want to continue to iterate on. And it's very complicated work. How can we continue to do that? And so doing so in a community like Ossining, where that's one of the things that I find most interesting about it. There isn't the animus against the police that you may see in some other communities where the people that would be in a kind of police reform group would describe themselves as anti-police and they're in there to try to dismantle the police or something like that. You don't really hear that kind of rhetoric on the committee. It's really about how can we improve the day-to-day quality of life for community members that are interacting with police, with the police's experience of the community. How can we continue to integrate the police and the community so that in many ways it's let's take what the police is already doing and go even deeper. So as an example, there used to be on a more limited basis, these kinds of community, almost like town halls, kind of community conversations where the community can come out and talk to police officers about whatever, and they'd be able to do that. Now, I think that that's really helpful and important, but if you're starting from a place maybe where there's a lot of pain and distrust, being able to set up a regular conversation with the police can become counterintuitive, counter to what you're trying to accomplish, right? Which is a conversation of like, hey, I'd like to see more foot patrol. Why don't we have more foot patrol? Well, we're actually like under-resourced in terms of manpower, and so a lot of those people are out doing their work. A lot of the stops that we do are traffic enforcement, and so they have to be in their vehicles. So that's why you don't see as many people walking around, blah, 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 blah. But the community doesn't know that level of detail, and so it's helpful to be able to have that level of conversation. But all of this is happening in a time and place when you're not responding to something that's really intense. And that's what can actually make this really successful, is that you can do a lot of that deep research and do a lot of that really interesting, more granular work without feeling like, but we're not addressing the main issue, which is X, Y, Z.
But for example, what have Peacekill have done right now? Do they have a term limit and a committee like this? Did it end to that part of Peacekill?
Yes. Yeah.
Cronin,
So
Peekskill, like Postchester, I mean, White Plains, what do they do with this type of committee? Are they done with that phase?
Most communities, including the ones that you mentioned, did not have implementation committees. So what they had was the mandatory report, and many of them formed committees around that report. And then that's basically it. And then there's a county, as the mayor mentioned, there's a county level police reform committee that a lot of folks that are local and the communities you mentioned are kind of nudged toward. So if you're still interested in this, move in that direction. But anything that's county level, it's not exactly going to meet the local needs in the same way that a local committee would. So it's not that typical at a local kind of county level. You don't see it in a lot of other communities. But nationally, there are models for this where you do see kind of ongoing police reform groups that are doing this kind of work.
Gotcha. Thank you. not that I'm against that. I think this it's a great concept and a great work that this group of people did, and they actually have accomplished a lot in our community here. I just think sometimes it becomes a little bit of conflict with what what we're trying to accomplish. I'm not sure if that I'm not saying I'm against the concept of doing this. Sometimes too many layers become too complex in some certain areas. I think a lot of the work is fantastic. A lot of the stuff that you produce. And I mean, what happens if we just decided, obviously the majority will rule, but what happens, can they do this as a group, as an individual group, not part of the village? Bring it in front of us as a recommendation. Is that something that they have looked into it?
Yeah, so there's basically two big differentiators that these folks just kind of decided independently to gather on Zoom once a month to talk about these issues versus being a committee here that's part of the village. Number one is the legitimacy that they would have when being able to gather community input. So if you have a random group of citizens that say, hey, we want to make suggestions to the police, will you come to this gathering? Will you fill out this survey? Whatever it is. It's harder if people are coming to them and saying, how are you connected to the village? Well, we're not. We're just, we're doing it. We want to kind of be helpful. It's harder to be able to kind of have that legitimacy. As opposed, this is all, with their perspective as well. As opposed to saying the board of trustees, this is a priority for them. And they have charged us with being able to gather information about what the issues are and then make recommendations for the solutions to those issues that they can then work with the police to implement. This is a real thing. This is not just people coming together and then we hope that they care about this. They've shown they care about this by making it an official committee. That's number one. Oh, please go ahead.
No. I was going to say, and that's exactly what thank you for clarifying that. That's exactly what I was hoping the answer to be. I guess my concerns is a little bit of what Rika mentioned is like, how much staff time are we looking to accommodate for this? She mentioned Stuart, but it's not just a Stuart. Sometimes it's just
it's Stuart. No,
It's Stuart and a paid police officer.
Yeah.
Well, that's as a member.
Yeah.
And I don't want to throw cold water because it's important. If you look at the tasks, who's going to be, for example, looking at all the policies and procedures?
Yeah.
Who's going to? I got a lot to do. And I don't mind doing it because I love this committee, but I gotta tell you, the other places that do this, they have a paid professional staff that do the police reform.
Yeah.
They have a paid professional staff. You look at most of the cities that have this, because that's where mayor.
No, Stuart, to your point, it is predominantly cities. It is not.
There are very few municipalities like this that have this. Because, for example, you asked about Peekskill. Peekskill didn't have anything. What they adopted was a CPCRB. I've been in touch with their manager. He's been asking how we set it on. That's what most of these places did. They created civilian police complaint review boards. Very few actually then went and had a separate organization. So the issue is, what these folks talk about is very important, but the question is, they are volunteers. And at the end of the day, someone's going to have to do that work.
In the world way thinking, and that was my question, because it is a concern for me. I mean, we have, and I'm not sure if you guys have talked about that. And if they want to do this work, because look, I know the boards do this, and I know Historic Preservation Commission, they do a lot of the work themselves, and they have consult or staff to help them on a lot of the things, but a lot of the work when I was there, and I'm sure when you were there, Dan, as well, we did a lot of the legwork ourselves to get to that point.
They wrote all those Museum of the Streets. They wrote those.
So, and again, it was complement with staff. I'm not saying the staff was not involved, but it was not as, maybe it was 60-40. Here it seems, as the steward mentioned, it's more like 100 or maybe 99.9 to 1% of a lot of the stuff.
They do a great deal of work and they come in there very much prepared. I'm just concerned in terms of, if you look at the tasks that are there, a lot of those tasks will be very time intensive. I don't know. It's a committee of, what is it now? 13, 14, I forget the number. There's probably 6 that are active all the time. That's what it is. And they're very active and they have a lot of things, but they all have their own jobs. They all have their own
And
things.
some of them sit on other volunteer committees that
So-
keep them very busy.
So my concern is the staff level,
Yeah.
because again, we know how much work Stuart does. And we have concerns, sometimes the Stuart like, what are you working on it? So I wouldn't want to take this away from Stuart and have another branch of additional work to Stuart. So I guess that's the part that I have trouble with. Not that I'm against the ideas and the concepts that they're working on it. It's just, what is our priority?
Yeah.
What are we setting up? Because again, this year, 2024, and the next level, we have a lot of stuff happening. And as you mentioned, Stuart is in everything. And we need him to concentrate on a lot of other stuff. Again, I'm not taking away from what they're doing. Please, please, please understand that. I'm just concerned that, what are we making a priority of, and how much time are we going to be selecting to this? So that's my major concern on this whole task. So
I totally hear that. My response to that would be, the best time to work on your roof is before it's raining. A pound, what is that? A cup of, help me out here. Ounce of prevention, pound of cure, et cetera, et cetera.
Stitching time saves 9.
Stitching time saves 9. 1 + 1 is 2. It is true. This is an investment. Like I said, we're not doing this in response to a crisis. It's an investment, right? The kind of benefits that we will yield from this, I would argue, will disproportionately outweigh the amount of resources that will go into it. Take, for example, the CPCRB, which we have had for a long time. It's all set up. And that as a response to this, now a neighboring community is like, how do we set this up? And now their lawyer is spending time trying to kind of figure out at this point, before they, not on a timeline of their choosing, but on the governor's timeline of like, you need to go up with something, the community says CPCRB, they need to figure it out now. My point would be, if the main concern is Stuart's time and cost and so forth, then there are, I would argue, options. Options include not everything that is a part of this needs to be requires counsel for every single step, right? So saying like, how can we bundle it so that we're specifically asking for, if it's Stuart's time, outside counsel's time, that we're hiring whomever at a specific time, so that we're doing this all on our own timeline. So if we say, for example, hey, the summer's really busy, so let's make sure that whatever time we're asking, it's going to be a spring and a fall kind of thing, or whatever the case may be. That would be my suggestion, because we can really make this what we want it to be, as opposed to something else.
So okay, so question in relationship to that. So I would like to, in a way, if possible, I would like to take Stuart out of this equation, like almost 100%. So that being said, because it becomes a budget portion, sure, it becomes a consultant. If we decide to have a consultant X, for whatever reason that may be, as an attorney, as a consultant to the research, whatever that. So maybe you guys can figure it out, the breakdown of the tasks that you guys want to accomplish in the next 2 years. And that will give at least me an idea of like, okay, we're going to need to hire one of the lawyers that we have, maybe they can help us with some of this stuff, doing this. Or maybe we do a paralegal, hire a part-time paralegal, whatever the case may be. But I need to kind of figure that out and be like, okay, this task is going to require this kind of abilities for the person to do this. Or it's going to be this, so it's going to be that, doing that. Maybe that, again, it will help me to understand what the next steps are. Because again, it becomes part of a budget that we did not include going forward for 2024. So we'll have to come out from general fund. So that's the part that I think I would like to understand that better. But again, I would like to take a Stuart out of the whole equation, maybe a 1% involvement or overseeing maybe on this whole thing, because you do understand the process. You are involved in a whole from beginning, from started to pretty much to now. So it'll be 1%, if anything.
I appreciate that. The one reason I would not want to, on my own, sunset out is because of my role with regard to the CPCRB, which really they dovetail. And as the deputy mayor said, the first year, and this is to be really fair to the committee, they literally spent the first year, as you know, revising that entire statute to what we now have, to what is really which is really a model, because I've gotten called from other municipalities on how it is.
Let's not charge their lawyer your hourly for your advice. We're gonna have to start charging you out for other municipalities.
So the point is that I think more than just separating me out, the better thing is if we can have discrete topics that they want to work on. For example,
right.
if the PRAC said, look, what we'd like to do is look at use of force. Throw that out just as an example. Well, that's a very discrete set of rules and regulations that one can look at, and then they can come back and they can say they want to do these things. A lot of what is up there is not really, if you want to call it quote unquote legal. I mean, it's, what is the public? Because, the last meeting, what they basically said was, we really wanted to hear what the public wants to think about this and what they want. And so that was a lot of what was said. And just, Mayor, to go back very beginning, what you were saying, and to be fair to the committee, it was presented to them that it would be the deputy mayor talking tonight. I am sure that if we had said, are any of you available, they would have been here in a heartbeat, because they were all, we actually had the last meeting, great attendance. It was like almost a full house. And so they were all there, and Sergeant McGovern
Actually,
dressed up as Santa Claus.
My expectation was that he was presented, but they were going to be here because there is no chair. So I'm just knowing that, I'm just surprised. It was more about that, not their lack of enthusiasm.
But as I said, my only point is in terms of the work that can be done, I think right now it's sort of general large topics, but they have certain aspects that they clearly do want to hone in on, and they want to get away from the CPCRB end of it. They've spent a lot of time on that. That's done. It's now just overall, relationship to the police. I think one of the things that one of the committee members said is they'd like to just see the police more involved with the community. There are a few who he says are there all the time, but he says there are many who don't get out of their cars and don't. And I'm just repeating what folks have said. So to that extent, how that goes, that's not a council issue. That's just a matter of how they act. But that's part of what was going on there. And the impression I got from the two meetings that we had, which would have been the December and the November meetings on this particular topic with the committee, was they just don't feel the work is done. They'd like to be able to sort of present what other issues they think are out there. And they may, but I will say this, the general overall view that they have of OPD is very positive. You listen to them at that meeting, you're not hearing a lot of criticism at all. So which I think, again, we don't record the meetings, but there's never been any real harangues about the police in any of them, but certainly in the last 2 months where they've been talking about the future of this committee, it's been much more, steady as it goes, and to see what they can do next.
Right. So somewhere between this, it would be, I think, important to chunk out some of these things. So I actually think Stuart likes doing this.
I think so. I mean, I thought you. I was trying to help you. You just don't want to let it go.
No, he doesn't. He likes it. When people like something, and so do the members of the committee. We should be so lucky that everyone that works on their jobs would be this excited about everything. It's just that Stuart is excited about many committees, and we have to be careful about. We are a relatively small, relatively small in the scheme of things, police department. It is not a city. So all these examples that I too had to research, not this year, but last year, is cities. And frankly, we're better than even most cities. And we're better than most cities that actually have real problems, like cops shooting human beings, right? Like actual things that show up in newspapers that were either handled correctly or incorrectly. Both require a lot of work, because many were done correctly and many weren't. Somebody died. We're not solving a specific problem, which would be a very different conversation. Right. So for me, the upside, it's all upside, but there is a reality here that we have to commit in a police organization that is so low in staff, somebody full-time to this. I don't mean it's their full-time job. I mean, I think it's the tasks, that page with the tasks that the committee needs to rethink. There has to be,
Well,
that's what her committee has to do, by the way.
Right.
Because I sat in one meeting and there were 48 suggestions in one night, and I'm sure every night there's 48 suggestions, and they're all fantastic, but you got to chunk out, because you can't just say, oh, they'll get me the paperwork, or they'll do. And some of them they can't do. It's confidential. They can't have access. Stuart can have access. He can redact things. So even if they wanted to do the work, they may not be able to, right? So there's like, does the PBA allow for access to certain information? So that's, me. I'm a very pragmatic person. This is an overview, because the purpose tonight was to say, this is not a committee that was supposed to extend beyond the time that we agreed.
Well, I think that's the question number one.
Are we extending it?
we extended.
We don't have to say question 2 exactly the way it's done. I think what we're doing now is not being negative, but rather saying, wow, people are interested in this. If they work with the police to make things better, that's what we'd like. We'd like committees who work within government to make things better for the community. That's cool. I'm not sure I agree that the exact membership type should stay exactly the same. I think it, our diverse community has diversity. I'm not sure it represents everyone, the way it's set up. So that's something that they might want to think. They might say, let's keep it as is this year. That's our recommendation, and come back with that. That's why I was so specific in asking you whether, because that actually is important to me. So that's something to think about.
Yeah.
But the tasks, really the time consumption might be, look, I could do this in third quarter if I plan for it, maybe this, maybe that. So I would look at the tasks. I would do a little bit more about how they're working with the police department, so that there's not just in the pictures, but in actual things. I don't actually see a downside to it, but I may be wrong.
No, so I have a no. I don't have a downside, and that's what I'm saying. To me, it was like, staff time and how does that relationship. So I guess my second question to the first question, are we making this a 2-year, or are we making this as a permanent not commit? Because that changes a lot.
Sure.
Can I jump in on that real quick?
Yeah, please, Bob.
Because he's hitting where I'm going with this. You've got a 2-year window. I would rather see a 1-year window and then bullet point certain things and then come back to us in a year. Because 2 years just gives it too much of a leash, I feel. So if they're that enthused, and we got a year to, okay, let's dial us into 1, 2, 3. All right, and come back. I just think 2 years is, well, that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
I would rather.
I'll respond to both. So the committee terms, the appointments are 2-year appointments. That's the way it was this year. As the way it was kind of 2 years ago. That's the way the resolution was framed. And conceivably, that's the way that it would be again, where folks are appointed for 2-year terms. The nature of the work is such that after a year, they might not have done enough of what they would have wanted to say definitively, here's the report that we can move forward. If you remember, during the executive order 203 days, it was a grind to be able to fit in as many things as possible. And we were doing that while we were doing a million other things, that with census and this and that and comprehensive plan, God knows what, like a million things. And so there was a sense of rush, and we needed that rush because we had a specific deadline we needed to meet that the governor set. In this case, because we have the luxury of doing this on our own timeline, my proposal and my argument would be doing it over the course of 2 years. It is, as Stuart has reminded us during the last meeting that we had, this is all the board's decision. It could be that after the first year presentation, the board says, you've done your work. Thank you. We no longer need you to do this work. And then it's done. It doesn't need to continue. It's truly serving at the pleasure of the board. Same question would come up in 2 years when they make their final report. The board takes a look at it and says, okay, we're good. This pretty much covers what we wanted to cover. We don't feel like this committee needs to exist anymore. It is the board's decision at that point. I would say prematurely saying, let's do a 1 year and then have this conversation again in a year, as opposed to the committee knowing that they have 2 years to kind of plan out, well, we can do these kinds of things year one, see what kind of response we get. Well, this worked, this didn't, let's try it again next year. Oh, it turns out that this time of year is a good time to get these kinds of, we want to get young people involved. Let's try to get them, whatever it is. You do it over the course of 2 years. From the board's perspective, it's not a huge cost. And then similarly, from what Stuart was arguing, his time is really involved with legal issues. Things that are not legal, that are about public engagement or whatever, have nothing to do with Stuart and doesn't take any of his time. And so why not give that committee enough time to do that kind of work, as opposed to saying, we only have a year. Stuart, we need as much of your time as possible because we only have a year to do the work in.
I also, if I may add to that, so a month ago, I would have said, great point, it's an interesting way to look at it. The police, as of a month ago, is going to go through a lot of changes. That's going to take a certain level of energy. These are volunteers. You miss 1 or 2 meetings. You miss 2 12s, 1/6 of the year. You got Christmas, nobody can do anything, family and all that. A year in the life of a volunteer group that is not the kind like the land use, where there are meters and time frames and consultants and engineers that carry things full-time, and the committee comes together once or twice, really twice, because they meet the once, and they also oftentimes meet to go over it, is much steadier and more planned. Here, they're going to have a meeting. How do we get this information? Like on one task, they might spend 6 meetings. 6 meetings is not a lot, an hour and a half a meeting, but that's half the length of the entire year. So I don't see any problem with 2 years for the reasons you said, but really because this is a part and parcel working with the police department. It has to be done. All of this has to be done with that. And right now, the police department is understaffed. So it's a little bit of a challenge. It's absolutely going through a change. We understand and know that as of a month ago. So the first quarter might be hard. And then there's adjustments that have to be made. So for that reason, I don't think it's a big deal. I mean, in principle, I agree with you, but as of a month ago, for me, that sort of changed a little bit. And I think their job's going to be different, because what also came out with the surveys is we understand that there are major issues across the country. But the purpose here is about committees related to awesome. If something happened in Maine or in Washington, it affects the world and affects the US. But how is our police department, how is it vis-a-vis that issue? And solutions that might be needed in Northern California might be great, but they're not really solving a problem that we may or may not have here. That takes time to run through that, to meet about that and all that. I think it's either no, they don't need to be re-upped. They've served the purpose that they were established for according to the resolution, and we're sort of done. But if we are going to go forward, then I think 2 years is very reasonable. And it's a good amount of time to say, they will say, I think, as many committees do, I really feel a purpose here and I'm doing something, and here's what I've done. Or I think they will say, you know what? We're not really able to do it, or we don't want to, or there's an alternate plan B, or we don't have enough people, whatever it is, or it should be different people, whatever. I think that's the right for me. 18 months might be a better time, but who cares? Now we're dealing with splitting hairs here. So for me, because of the change going on in the overall police department, I think that will affect their ability to do certain things, and it'll change things.
So I guess for what I'm hearing is that an extension of the committee for the next 2 years. Okay.
Yeah, Stuart, we don't have to do.
Then the board will assess at that point. Yeah, yeah, of course.
Mayor, I think you would need to do a resolution because the existing resolution essentially would have them sunsetted at December 31st of this year.
All right.
So my thought to follow from what the deputy mayor was saying is this resolution could simply be the committee is continuing, and you've got, in terms of membership, I know you were talking about membership. For example, one of the members was supposed to be from the NAACP. We have never had an attendee from the NAACP in the entire 2 years.
Right. To be clear, there might be people who sit on this committee who are members or paid members. That is not the same as the NAACP sending a designated person who represents, and that was very clear in the first meeting. They must represent the NAACP, not their points of view. It's like anything else. We're being recorded. I just want to be clear about that. So you're suggesting
Well,
that
my
we don't
point is that,
use the
for
same
example,
categories?
you might want, instead of having an NAACP representative, might want to just have another, someone else, because it's, for all intents and purposes, it's essentially been a vacant seat for 2 years. We should also speak with the supervisor to see who she would like to have on behalf of the town.
Has somebody from the town?
There is, but that we've not had attendance.
Okay.
So those kind of things. But I think you can certainly have a resolution continuing. Everyone who was on Zoom absolutely wants to continue, and they all want to be re-upped. They are discussing their recommendation to the board as to who the next chair would be, and the deputy mayor knows who that is. That person sort of has to let us know if they're actually even, she's interested, because she was sort of like completely unawares.
Just a pointer.
She was absolutely like flummoxed when her name was mentioned. But
so it isn't actually exactly the same. So you'd have to delineate.
A little
you
bit.
Could say a person or somebody, to leave it open. So we leave it to you.
That would be fine. But in that sense, and basically it'll do that. We can have the reporting. I'll vet a resolution to everybody, and then if it has to be tweaked early in the year, that's fine. But at least this way we have the members coming in for next year.
Right, because we're in December. We have 2 more meetings.
One more
meeting this year. So little tight.
Wait,
okay.
Sorry.
I just had a couple of brief notes. If I
Please, and after you, I'm going to ask Dana, not that you have to, but if you want to add.
First, I'd like to mirror what you, Mayor, and what you, Deputy Mayor, said, that it is a luxury to deal with a crisis not within your borders, and to have that time and distance to evaluate a crisis that's not happening in your own backyard. So that is certainly the better way to go at it. In terms of just practically speaking, the review of rules and regulations, just in the interest of not covering the same ground twice, whoever ends up being the next chief would be wise to order a full review of our rules and regulations, which is a weighty document. So you might want to hold off on that work until after a new manual is published with the new signature of the new chief on there, because there may be changes that you might have recommended that were already made. Also, there was mention to best practices. I'd love to have somebody or have myself speak to the group about the New York State DCGS accreditation process. We've been DCGS accredited since 2009. I'd like to, in the coming year, investigate CALIA accreditation as well, which is a national accreditation process. It's a heavy lift. It's not an easy thing to get. So it is something that we would have to really examine and see if it's worth our investment. But it is a very prestigious accreditation. But I think it could be a resource for the group to see what law enforcement, not only law enforcement professionals, but professionals in law enforcement adjacent communities feel are the best practices for law enforcement. We are already following those set by the state. Again, we're looking to see if that national accreditation would be worth the effort as well. And then just the final thing I wanted to say was we really look forward to, it's a high priority to get officers back on foot patrol, back on bicycles, and among the community in 2024. Very high on our list of things that we want to get done. And we're excited to get folks back out there and interacting in that way. The police car is arguably the best and worst thing to happen in law enforcement, because obviously you can respond more quickly and to incidents further away, but it does break that community interaction that's so valuable. So we look forward to getting that piece back.
Great. Dana, thank you.
My only comment is that a lot of what has been changed was within our ability to change. There's a lot of stuff that goes on, I think, in terms of policing that if you want to change it, is simply not up to us. You've got the Police Benevolent Association, you've got unions, you've got state and federal, I mean, sometimes these things are baked into a bigger system than what we run. So obviously, anything you focus on is going to be stuff that is within our ability to change. So
Okay, so I'm getting the feeling that people are in support of this. This was a little longer conversation, but I think it's important and it always helps to have the presentation. I think that, look, I looked at the website today and the fact that we now have the police, like what was asked for is like, how do you contact the police? Where are the names of the office and all that? Like, okay, now we look at the website and go, oh, well, that's obvious, but it wasn't obvious 2 years ago. And that mental health unit really didn't just come from Ossining. We said it all along, not within, as you just said, not within all our control, but because a few municipalities went for it and the county was always the right place to have it. And, you know, our chief and his staff said, we're raising our hand, let's do it here. And the police reform sort of created that conversation. That's, to me, the best part of this committee is that when all those levers are pulled in unison, then everybody benefits. And I always have said, and people have heard me, sometimes you get one win. That one win is huge. So I think we have 2 wins, probably 3 wins easily. So I think this is exciting. I think it's great when people are excited to work with government. I think it's also educational. So few people understand how fire departments work. So few people understand how EMT works, and so few understand how police departments work. So much of the work in police must also, by their nature, are dealing with things that most of us see on TV. And I'm pretty sure that it is totally inaccurate on TV. So it's I think a good learning for things through committees like this. So I'm for it. Unless Bob, you are really opposed to the 2-year thing and want to argue.
I want to throw it out there.
No, I appreciate it, but I just want to make sure that we're all okay with the different elements. I would appreciate going back a little bit and maybe honing in on a couple, and I'm only looking at you because you're presenting it. We do need to appoint a chair. Tell her I'm begging. I don't usually beg, but I'm going on record as begging, because she would be wonderful.
That'll mean a lot to her.
We can't mention her name because if she says no, I don't want to embarrass her, but nevertheless, I'm trying to embarrass her with the mic working.
The eyes got so big.
That's a good thing she was paying attention, because I've been voted onto a board because I was zoning out and all of a sudden my name showed up somewhere. And I was like, when did that happen? Thank you. And Stuart, I'm glad you like it, because really, if you said to us, look, I can't, I just am over, but I know you like it, but you're also going to have to be good.
They're a wonderful, wonderful group. And they come prepared. They hit the ground. I tell you, it's 7:30. They are off to the races, and they're all on by 7:25. I mean, they're all just bouncing around,
and they're very busy people. I know the individual; they're all busy. So this is anybody, and you and I talk about this. When you have a group of people that are genuinely interested, you always say yes. It's like it's a positive thing. So I would request that attendance, as you say, taken, because as you had mentioned publicly, and you use people's titles and names, and I'm sure I'll hear about it tomorrow. It's just the facts. Those are data points, and you take attendance, and when people show up, they need to be there actually for more than half of the meeting, not for 5 minutes and then leave. So I'm happy to hear that they're engaged and all that. So you're going to go back or if they'll see this, to say that the board, I don't think we have to vote on this. We're going to put a resolution. We vote on the resolution, not on this conversation. Yeah. This was terrific with a few sort of tweaks and the police being involved, and maybe one day we will have so many motorcycles. I got really scared. Well, we may have to get motorcycles. They may end up replacing some of our cars. We'll see how that goes. Thank you. Anybody else? Did we leave anything off? So we have a busy executive session. So I'd like to conclude this and thank you for doing this, because it is rare that in addition to everything else you do and that we all do, that you actually put this together. It was very nice of you. Let's move through to the next thing. I think goes back to Karen.
Yeah.
Okay. So last week, Trustee Fritchie and I met with representatives from Independent Hose. It was a efficient meeting, and they were fine with just really basically extending the lease for another 3 years based on the same terms. So we had sent everybody a copy of the lease. With the only change is that we do have some insurance requirements that we didn't have before.
I assume
And
that's the red lettering.
yes,
Okay.
it's based on a 3.5% increase per year based on the rent we were paying the last year. And that is basically it.
Okay, and my question was, I thought we were renting the whole
No.
thing. So they use it for other functions aside from.
That's a yes.
We don't need the whole thing.
Yeah, we do pay for heat, but that said, it is
Oh, so you
pretty
don't
straightforward.
prorate for the square footage, the costs. You pay for all of the heat, even though they use it for place for other things.
Correct.
Huh. I looked at the total price. It's fine. Okay.
So like I said,
so I'm asking. Okay.
Right. So we added the insurance. We had told that to them. So at next week's meeting, if the board's in agreement, we will have a resolution. You can vote on a resolution to authorize me to sign the lease agreement.
Okay.
Just a couple of quick items because it was a busy day and some things came up. During the budget meetings, we recognized it wasn't at a work session, but during the budget meetings, Clerk Donnelly spoke to the board about the clerk IMA, the town village clerk IMA, and she had a proposal to increase the amount. Currently, the village pays 65% for the village town clerk through the IMA, and I think her recommendation was to increase that to 70%, and that would facilitate the hiring of a part-time in her office to allow her to continue doing the work that the clerks do. So that will, we do have a revised IMA that we'll be sending out. And that will also be on next week's legislative agenda. And the other point is I did get a late breaking update on the pool. And Trustee Casada had asked last time we met. We are still looking at January, but it's going to be the end of January. The main reasons for the delays are, as you know, we were looking for a leak in the pool. Thankfully, it turned out to really be seepage through the cracks in the pool, which is a bit of an easier fix, but we lost some time searching for those leaks. There's also an element on the lighting that is on back order. But they are working. There's a lot of work they can do in the meantime. They will be working, and we will keep you posted on the pool is anticipated to open at the end of January now. And we are also working to make sure that we can get the locker rooms up and running. The issue with the locker rooms, and I actually have the correct terminology, is in none of the plans that we had, it showed that there were grade beams underneath the floor. So that's a structural component. And they have to navigate around those beams that are under the flooring of the locker rooms and navigate around that to put the plumbing in and make sure that it meets all health code requirements. So that we're navigating that, and that may or may not take a little bit longer than we anticipated, just because we're finding something that was a structural issue that we were completely unaware of and is not represented on any of the drawings that we have and the plans that we have in the building department.
So how much over budget we are gonna be?
Right now, it doesn't, everything we're doing, right now, there's no substantive change order that's involving a significant amount of money. If anything happens, we will be the first to know about that. But right now, we're sort of navigating. Lothrop has brought on a structural engineer who's helping, and so far, none of the interventions we have to do are particularly costly. So there will be some minor costs here and there, certainly well within the contingency, but right now we're good. Not good.
Do you think that, so still January, but just.
Well, the pool will be open at the end of January. So like you know, the pool will be open, then we'll have a trailer outside that will accommodate the locker room, because the locker room is going to take a bit longer. And it will be set up in a way that will have a covered tented walkway, so it'll be as warm as possible for people to come in and out.
Remind me, what was the time frame for the whole project to be completed by?
Like February, March.
No, I'm talking about like, because it was supposed to be done this year.
December of 20.
No, it was before December.
I don't remember what the original time frame, but the whole project is, you know, a several month project. So
No,
we're
I know it was going to be before December.
They started September 11th. They said they'll have it at the end of the year.
And it was before.
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, look, it's like everything else. We do a lot of hurry up and wait, and
I'm not saying that, no, I understand that, but part of my concern, obviously, we may be within the budget, but the programs that we utilize, the pool, are not being utilized. So budget wise, that's
Right.
going to be slightly affected.
It will be slightly affected. You know, that's to be expected. Hopefully we'll be able to make it up. There's some cost savings that we have when we're not running the programs for some part-time staff and things like that. But you know, it is necessary work, and so far, knock wood, we were really concerned when we found out that, you know, there was an ongoing leak, and then we couldn't find the leak, and luckily that turns out not to be a major issue. So you know, we're still working, generally speaking, within the time frame, and there is a lot of pressure. Certainly the contractor knows that we have to get this up and running as soon as possible. We get inquiries every day. So we will be, I just found this all out late this afternoon. We'll be writing it up, getting it out. We'll make sure we put in the mayor's message and post and just continue to keep people informed. And unless there are any questions, that concludes our agenda for this evening.
Folks. Thank you.
Motion to adjourn to executive session for matter of personnel.
So move.
All in favor?
Aye.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. And it's the meeting 9:48, I guess, 9:49. We will be back next Wednesday, and I'm sorry. Oh, a reminder that it's the courthouse. Yes. And that will be, we're nearing the end of 2023. Thank you all. Have a great evening.